Okay, welcome to chemistry. My name is Mr. Schmidt, and today we are going over our assignment week 2A, and our success criteria for this is that I can identify a compound as ionic or molecular when given the name or the chemical formula of the compound. And so it's important that we can identify whether a compound is ionic or molecular because we're going to be asked to develop these formulas and put those into a chemical equation later on. And so if you can identify it as ionic, you know that you need to balance the charges so that the sum of the charges equals 0. And then you know if it's molecular that you need to use prefixes in order to get to the right ratio of each atom in the formula. And so the first thing that we'll look at here are the definitions or the descriptors for both compounds. An ionic compound is a compounds that are made up of metals which lose electrons to form cations and nonmetals which gain electrons to form anions. So the meat and potatoes of what you need to know is that an ionic compound is made up of a metal and a nonmetal. A molecular compounds, they are compounds that are made up of only nonmetals. Electrons are shared between the atoms to form a compound. So they do not form ions whatsoever. And the meat and potatoes of what you need to know here as far as identification goes is that they are made up of nonmetal and nonmetal. And so when we look at these, we should be able to find these real easy by looking at our periodic table and identifying whether they are made up of a metal and nonmetal or a nonmetal nonmetal. So if we look at the first example, sodium and chlorine, or sodium chloride as it would be called, we would then simply go to our periodic table and see what is the makeup. Is sodium a metal or a nonmetal? Is chlorine a metal or a nonmetal? And so we can do that by looking at this periodic table, and it's a little difficult to view. I understand that. I would probably prefer you use ptable.com, and you can use ptable.com very easily. If you go to sodium and you want to know if it's a metal or a nonmetal, you simply hover over these. And if it's a metal and you hover over metal, it will be in the colored section. And if I want to know about chlorine, I click on chlorine, and then I can click over nonmetal, and chlorine is a nonmetal. So I can identify sodium chloride very easily as an ionic compound because it is made up of a metal and a nonmetal, and that is associated with an ionic compound. So I would simply move it over here. And then I have the next one, carbon monoxide, carbon and oxygen. And I just need to know, is it a metal and a nonmetal or a nonmetal nonmetal? And so I go to my ptable.com. I find carbon, I hover over metal. Carbon is not a metal because it's not in the colored section. Is it a nonmetal? Yes. What about oxygen? Yes. So it's both a nonmetal, and I simply move it over to a molecular compound because nonmetal are associated with a molecular compound. And so you do that for questions 1 and 2. As far as questions 3 and 4 go, I'm going to give you an example using this example number 5. Do not do this problem. I'm showing you how to do that right now. And this would be between sodium and sulfide, or sodium and sulfur, right? Sodium sulfide is the name of the compound, but that is a compound of between sodium and sulfur. All right, and when they form ions. And so we need sodium, which is Na, and we need sulfur, which is S. And a lot of people get those kind of mixed up because sodium looks like it should have maybe a symbol S, but actually its symbol is Na. All right, so we need to draw the particular drawing for the ions. I do not want you to draw dot structures here. That is not what we're looking for. All we're looking for is compounds where the sum of the charges equals 0. So all we're doing is showing the ions here. Okay, so in order to do that, we need to know what charge sodium will form. So if we go to our periodic table, and this is the periodic table I would suggest you use, and don't use ptable.com for these. And if you look at sodium, above sodium, it tells you, so everything in this group 1 is 1A, has a +1 charge. So sodium has a +1 charge. So I will go over here, and I will go back to my problem, and I can add a +1 charge to sodium. So I click on the text, and then I move this box and move it to where I want it to be, and I can even resize it in the top right corner. So sodium has a +1 charge. Now I will find out what charge does sulfur have. And so I go back to this periodic table, and I find sulfur, and above sulfur is a -2. So sulfur has a -2 charge. And so what I will do there is I will go back to my problem and I will give sulfur a -2 charge. So I'll hit text, -2, and then I can hit this box and I'll move it to where I want it to be. And then I can resize that to whatever size I want. And it's going to be in the top right corner. Now, do the sum of the charges equal 0? 1 plus -2 does not equal 0. Would I need to add more sodium, or would I need to add more sulfur in order for my charges to be 0? That's right. You would need to add more more sodium rather, more sodium in A. And that's because sodium has a +1 charge. We don't need to go look at it again. We already have it written right there. And we'll put a +1 charge over here. And so now what we see is we have sodium +1, and sulfur -2. So 1 + 1 - 2 gives us 0. And so we have the right ratio of sodium ions to sulfide ions. And so actually the formula would be Na2S, because that's what our picture would show. The sum of the charges equals 0. And so that's all you need to do in your pictures. There's no dots involved. Just go find the what the charge of the ion is based on the periodic table that I have listed in the formative or in the assignment, and then put those together in such a way that you will end up with a charge of 0 when you add all of the charges. Okay, so hopefully that helped. And if you have any questions, please email me or ask me in class. Thank you very much.